Laying out a composition can feel really intimidating, and I have a couple suggestions for you. And one of them I got from a plein air artist. So plein air art is when someone goes outside and draws from life and transfers it to a canvas or paper, right? So this is someone where we have this person who we might idealize in terms of they're so good that they can look outside and be outside in nature and paint it and it looks beautiful and realistic, or references realism. It might be more impressionistic, right? But they draw or paint this thing and it really looks like what they're seeing. Okay. Well, this man that I was reading about, he actually creates and frames his composition using his phone. So old school, people used to use a viewfinder. So old school, people literally used to create boxes with their hands. And so you can see, you could be looking at my face and trying to decide, well, what would make an interesting composition? So they couldn't look at this whole room and go, okay, how do I make sure I'm on the piece of paper that I'm on? What would be interesting? So instead they'd use their fingers, or they'd cut a piece of paper that had a square or rectangle in it to help them decide, well, what would make an interesting composition? What do I like? Because then I know, okay, if I like this is exactly how things should look on my paper. And that little bit of negative space you can see by my hair, that would be a way to place it. You might place it by looking at my eyes, which are kind of almost in the middle of the paper, right? So it helps you create the frame so that you know what you're looking at. Well, this plein air artist, he uses his phone. So he'll use his phone, he'll move it around and try to find the composition he likes. And then he'll photograph it, and then use that photograph to lay out the composition. So now here I have this image of me, and I have clear negative space and edges, and I would draw that part first so that then I know where everything else kind of fits, and that might mean filling in with value. So let's look at that now. I think what I would consider doing to get myself started, I want to make sure, is I would be looking at my space and figuring out what the distance is. So here I can see that I have kind of this figurine, right? So she kind of, look at the distance here, right? So I can kind of measure the distance, and the distance should be pretty much the same. So she might need to be moved over more. And so I'm kind of just outlining their shapes, but I could even use the shadows that she has, right? And then I'd look at angles, right? So I can see what's the angle of this. You could lay your pencil or pen down, and that same angle should match here no matter what. And then if you look at this angle, sometimes it's hard. These are actually some challenging angles to work with. Well, if you lay your pencil down in that angle, then that angle should match perfectly here. Okay, so you can see I'm fiddling a bit. So then look at the space, right? And then the angle here is going to match. So we've got some matching here, okay? And then the kind of edge of the book is missing from her. You can't really see it, but this comes out here, right? So then we come out this way. Right? So then we kind of have the placement of these objects. And I'd be doing this with really soft pencils that aren't really heavy in mark, so that I know what I'm doing. And here already, I think that the image space I have isn't as wide as this image. So I might even need to narrow it a bit, because I'm going to be going off the edge here because there's not enough room. So we have the butterfly. And the butterfly seems to be kind of in this space, because where does it start and stop? It kind of starts above the book, right? So it kind of starts above here, but then where does it finish? If we look at it, it kind of finishes at the edge of the book, so that we know that it would kind of finish somewhere in here. So I would be making loose marks like this that kind of look maybe a little confusing or unclear, but they're placing my objects for me. And I can see that I don't have quite enough space. I might need to make it bigger, but my cross would kind of fit in here. Again, considering space between the butterfly and the book and what's going on. So there's some issues with space already in my drawing that I'd have to play with a bit more. But you can see already by doing this, I'm filling the space of the page, and it's reflecting kind of the size of these size of these objects. And let's look at the height of the cup versus the height of the figurine. There's quite a bit of space there, right? So then we want to make sure that that space kind of matches. So here I've kind of lost the top half, that's all dark. But so I think that would finish, and then the bottom finishes where Donna has it, right? So you can see I've kind of just generally laid things out. So you can do this with a really soft pencil just to lay out shapes. But another way you can do this, so here we can see with Donna that she did create a lined edge, thinking about the space and the shape to manage it. But then we kind of worked a little smaller on our objects and created more space than perhaps there is in terms of the objects. So the book kind of ran a little bit longer. I do think the book's size is generally correct, but then looking at the space of the edge of the book to the edge of this photograph over here. And again, if you've been working from life, that also changes it. And that's totally okay. I want you guys to be able to practice and work from life. But one trick to help you start to get better at working from life is to use your phone like I was just showing you, so that you have an opportunity to kind of practice getting the general outline or shape of the art, the composition first. And then once you have that general shape, I lose the photograph. Like, I don't look at the photograph anymore. I only use it to place my objects generally on the surface. And then you have this wonderful, beautiful still life in front of you that you can look at and practice from. So use that instead. But having that photograph where you can kind of see the edges and how they work together can really help you make sure that your layout is accurate. And I want to point out here, because I know some people can have this kind of internalized definition of what it means to be a good artist, that some people might be saying, well, will using this camera make it a handicap, or will I ever be able to do it? Yes, at some point in your life, if it's important to you that you just be able to look at a space or create a composition and know exactly where the frame is edged, that is something you can work towards. But remember, artists from all times across all of art history have always used tools to help them achieve the results they want. Renaissance artists used a grid. There were several Renaissance artists who used a grid to help them with their work. They might have used camera obscura. There's some evidence to suggest they used different kinds of cameras to help them project images onto their surfaces to help them be more accurate with realism. So this isn't a crutch, like something that is limiting you in some way. This is a tool that can help you really focus on lights and darks and being more accurate portraying the objects you're studying. And then as you get more confident with that, you're going to start noticing how to more accurately place them on a surface. So please keep that in mind for yourselves and be kind and patient with yourselves around this. There's a lot of diagonals here. You've got a lot of diagonals that you could use to place things, or you really could, there's such beautiful lights and darks in her image, you could literally just start filling it all in, right? So there's like this really nice dark shadow here, right? So you could fill that all in. I might even like start with the cup and its shadow, right? You could immediately fill in some of your darkest dark areas, and then that would help you know where everything else fits, right? So I would very much consider drawing in the background behind the figurine and the vase. Not the vase, the cup. And you've got this beautiful white highlight here. So I know that that's there. So then there's this soft transition of light and dark here, and then it moves into this very dark gray. So I would fill all of that kind of part in. So you don't necessarily have to, again, outline or draw shapes of things. You might lightly kind of place where you see objects. But then again, once you kind of know their general placement, I would focus entirely on value and seeing where this line is, and then looking at these different areas of light and dark as shapes that I could be filling in. And that also can be a really helpful way to make sure you're filling the whole space of your paper and using it all up, so that you have the space too to look at the wonderful details inside the objects you're studying as well. This book has a lovely gray to it, and it's pretty even in terms of value, except right kind of back in here it gets a little bit darker. You also have the lovely white highlight here. Like, in terms of photograph, this is a quite nice image to work with because of the lighting. And you've got some beautiful kind of shadow areas here that help create the kind of the fold and the direction of the fabric, as well as this beautiful just kind of highlighted area, right? So studying some of those bits and placing those first can help you make sure that the size of your objects is representative and proportional to the image reference you're working with.